Literature is anything that is printed as long as it is related to the ideas and feelings of the people, whether it is true or just of one's imagination, based on Webster. Literature can also mean imaginative or creative writing, which is looked up for its artistic value, based on Wikipedia.
Pre-colonial period BC 1564. The evolution of Filipino literature depends on the influences of the colonialization and the spirit of the age. Culture during the early period 1,000 years ago, the early Filipinos were composed of different groups that came from different parts of Asia. With different groups, they formed their own community, system of education, and religious beliefs. Indigenous Philippine literature was based on tradition and customs of a particular area of the country. The first Filipino alphabet, called Alibata, was replaced by the Roman alphabet. Ancient literature was written on a perishable material like dried leaves, bamboo cylinders, and bark of the tree. There are two literary forms during the pre-colonial period: written literature, riddles or bugtong, epigrams or salawikain, poems or tanaga, oral literature, chant, and balagtasan.
The American colonial period from 1898 to 1945. Philippine literature in Spanish was starting to lose its track in the first decade. The Filipino revolutionists won against the Spaniards, who colonized for more than 300 years. Hence, Spanish, Tagalog, vernaculars, and finally, English were the mediums used in the literature during these times. Many Filipino writers went into all forms of literature like news reporting, poetry, stories, plays, essays, and novels. Their writings clearly depicted their love of country and their longings for independence. American period in the Philippines was sparked by three significant developments in education and culture. Through the languages, the secondary learner writers were able to release their experiences through writing. Philippine literature in English was more universal. Even if Philippine literature was in English, the preservation of the content for Filipino experience was achieved, making it the Filipino style. And here are some examples of authors and their works. Chrysalida's poem by Maria Guerrero, Said the Shahal of Flor novel by Balmori, A Sun-Inborn short story written by Manuel Argilia. Sarsuela was overpowered by English drama.
Spanish colonial period 1565-1897. The Spanish colonial period of the Philippines began when explorer Ferdinand Magellan came to the island and claimed it as a colony for the Spanish Empire. The 16th century was the start of the deprivation of the indigenous Philippine literature. Spanish colonial government were able to manipulate literature by monopolizing it under the religious orders. Literature evolves mainly of the themes of Spanish, European culture, and of course, the Roman Catholic religion. Literary influences during Spanish colonization. Doctrina Cristiana by Father Juan de Placenta. Libro de la Lengua Tagala by Fernando Bagumbata. Passion influenced by context of Christianity. Filipino writers in Spanish became conscious for the search of freedom. Passion Dagat Ipag-alag ng Puso by Marcelo H. del Pilar. Patnubay ng Binyagan by Pascual Pobletes. No Limitang Hiring by Jose Rizal. Awit and Corrido by Damiana L. Eugenio. Ang pinakaikling version, Florante at Lara, ni Francisco Baltazar.
The Contemporary Period, 1946 to present. This period started during the rebirth of freedom in 1946 to present. On July 4, 1946, the Philippines regained its freedom and the Filipino flag waved joyously alone. The chains were broken. The state of literature during this period. The early post-liberation period was marked by a kind of struggle of mind and spirit posed by the sudden emancipation from the enemy and the wild desire to see print. A. Heart of the Islands, 1947, a collection of poems by Manuel Viray. B. Philippines Cross-Section, 1950, a collection of prose and poetry by Maximo Ramos and Florentino Valeros. C. Prose and Poems, 1952, by Nick Joaquin. D. Philippine Writing, 1953, by T.D. Agcauli. E. Philippine Harvest, by Amador Daguio. F. Horizons List, 1967, a collection of works by the professors of UE by Artemio Taxil and Silverio Baltazar. G. Who Spoke of Courage in His Sleep, by NVM Gonzalez. H. Speak Not, Speak Also, by Conrado V. Pedroche. I. Other poets were Toribia Manio and Edith L. Tempo. Jose Garcia's Villas have come. Here has won acclaim both here and abroad. The new Filipino literature during this period. Filipino literature in Tagalog was revived during this period. A. Period of activism, 1970 to 1972. Many young people became activists to ask for changes in the government. The literary revolution. The youth became completely rebellious during this period. Writing during the period of activism. The irreverence for the poor reached its peak during this period of the mass revolution. B. Period of the New Society, 1972 to 1980. The period of the New Society started on September 21, 1972. Almost all themes in most writings dealt with the development or progress of the country, like the Green Revolution, family planning, proper nutrition, environment, drug addiction, and pollution. Filipino surroundings. The play under the New Society. The government led in reviving old plays and dramas like the Tagalog Zarzuela, Kinakulo, and the Imbayaka of the Muslims, which were presented in the rebuilt Metropolitan Theater, the Folk Arts Theater, and the Cultural Center of the Philippines. Radio and television. Radio continued to be patronized during this period. Filipino films. A yearly pista ng mga pelikulang Pilipino was held during this time. Comics, magazines, and other publications. In this period of the New Society, newspapers donned new forms. Letter C. Period of the Third Republic, 1981 to 1985. After 10 years of military rule and some changes in the life of the Filipino, which started under the New Society, martial rule was at last lifted on January 2, 1981. Philippine films during this period. The yearly Festival of Filipino Films continued to be held during this period. Letter D. Rebirth of Freedom, 1986 to present. History took another twist. Once more, the Filipino people regained their independence, which they lost 20 years ago. Newspapers and other publications. Newspapers, which were once branded crony newspapers, became instant opposition papers overnight. Books. The Philippine Revolution of 1986 and the fire of its spirit that will carry the Filipinos through another epoch in Philippine history is still being documented, just as they have been in the countless millions who participated in body and spirit in its realization.